Right. Well, what we're talking about today is the amygdala. And if you haven't heard of the amygdala before, it's part of your brain. It's this little almond-shaped organ at the base of your brain stem. And it has a really important job. Its job is to let you know if you're safe or not safe. So it's kind of like a security guard, if you like. And what this little primal part of our brain does is that it accumulates all of our life experiences into like a database. And when we go ahead and meet somebody or go into a new situation, it assesses the new situation, a new person, against the database of your past experiences. And it assesses that new person or thing as either safe or unsafe. If it's safe, that person is deemed friendly and not a threat. Nothing happens, you smile, you engage, you have a lovely conversation and carry on. If the amygdala goes, whoop, that's a threat, what happens is it goes into action. It fires off cortisol and adrenaline through your system. Now, this is a survival response, and it is a primitive response we've had with us since we were cave people days. And it was really important to keep us from getting eaten by tigers and other predators or attacked by other tribes. And it was also really important to either fight what's the things that were attacking us, run away from the things that were attacking us, or freeze. That's your fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. So what happens when the amygdala fires off, cortisol and adrenaline, and we are just super pumped up to survive, essentially. And what happens with the rest of our brain and biochemistry is that we get tunnel vision, because we just need to deal with this thing that is threatening our survival. We lose access to our short-term memory because everything is primed just to dealing with the present moment. And we are unable to learn, unable to really collaborate, unable to really be consultative because we're just like so focused. We lose access to our frontal lobe, which is our neocortex, our executive brain. So nothing really of a tall order in terms of brain processing can happen when we are fired up by the amygdala. And this is when this happens, it's called an amygdala hijack because our rational brain gets hijacked by the survival brain. This is really useful if we are being chased by someone or something. It is really useful if we have to sprint away from a burning house or something like that. So when our survival is threatened, we need all that extra amazing energy that comes from the amygdala charging forth all that cortisol and adrenaline. It's not so helpful if we are in the workplace and we're trying to problem solve with our peers. Now, this fantastic work by a neuroscientist, Australian neuroscientist called David Rock, uncovered that there are actually some things in contemporary workplaces that cause an amygdala hijack. And it may not look like run away, or fight, or freeze. And yet what happens biochemically is the same thing. Cortisol and adrenaline gets shoved through the body and we are unable to focus and have decent conversations. Now, this is really important when we are having difficult conversations, that we know if we are being triggered or if the other person is being triggered. So let's have a look at what these contemporary work triggers are, and to see, as you think about your difficult conversation that you need to have, which ones are being triggered for you, maybe there's some of them, and which ones might be being triggered for the person you need to have a difficult conversation with. All right, so let's just have a look at that. Just 1 second. Okay. Here we go, a lovely brain. And then the amygdala is down here at the little brainstem part. Okay, so these are the triggers for the amygdala, and the more primal ones are at the bottom to the more sophisticated ones, more complex triggers, more socialized triggers. So at the base of all the triggers, uncertainty is one of the things that can pop us into survival mode. So if you don't know what's going to happen, that feels unsafe. And so whoop, amygdala pumps up and you're into an amygdala hijack, which can be challenging. Exclusion is the next social trigger. So we are tribal animals and we find safety in a crowd. We feel safe when we're around other like-minded individuals, the people that we like to hang out with. In the workplace, that's our colleagues, that's our teammates. At home, that's our family. So these little bonds, these human bonds, these social bonds are really important for us to help us feel safe. It's how we evolved as a species, actually, by being tribal and communal. If we are excluded from the tribe, this is a real sense of threat to our survival, because it's much more difficult to survive out on your own than it is part of a collective. So if you get excluded from a meeting, say for example, you get left off the invitation list and you feel like you should be there, that can really hurt, and that can cause us a little survival threat. Or if your friends get moved to another office block and you're left alone, and all of a sudden like, whoa, how do I fit in here? Am I going to feel safe in this new environment? So exclusion can be really something that pushes our survival buttons and causes an amygdala hijack. Fairness is another one. And some of us have more sensitivity to fairness than others. And why is fairness an amygdala trigger? Because if you think about it, when we were in tribes, the whole social dynamic of a tribe was balanced on fair distribution of the communal resources, if you like. And they weren't necessarily equal distribution of the resources, but they were deemed fair by the social norms of the group. So that's where the problems come in contemporary workplaces, because what we deem as fair may not be what the leader deems as fair. And then we can have this big clash. So an example might be, you feel that it's fair that you should get the job, to get the promotion, but your colleague who's 2 years younger and new to the organization got it instead. That doesn't feel fair. You're older, you're more experienced, you've been around longer, you should get the promotion. Now your boss may think it's completely fair because the new person is more skilled. However, you might have been triggered by that sense of fairness, by your value structure and what you think is equitable. So fairness can be a real survival threat trigger and can cause a whole bunch of drama for us. Overwork is another one. So all of us want to perform at work. And if we take on too much or get given too much, the ability to perform can be challenged or compromised. And so we can feel overwhelmed by that and feel like we're drowning, and that can cause a sense of panic and a sense of difficulty in surviving. So when we had the pandemic initiate, a whole bunch of people got triggered across a lot of these elements, from the uncertainty, from the fairness component of it all, and from the overwork piece. All of a sudden, there's a whole bunch more work that people had to do in order to figure out how are we going to respond to the pandemic, what the legal requirements, what the OH&S requirements were, and how can we just be safe getting through that. The next one is lack of choice. So when we have change done to us, and we didn't have a voice in that, that can really push our survival buttons. No one likes having change done to them. So not having a choice in the matter, like not having a choice about whether you went into lockdown or not, can really push our survival mechanism and put us into unhelpful amygdala hijack state. So not having a choice and having our autonomy taken away from us is a real problem. And the last one here is status. Now, status is one that people don't necessarily think is important to them until you have the experience of it. When we think status, think about if you aren't consulted on something, even though you're the clear expert on it, or you've had like a huge amount of expertise in a particular area and nobody consults you on that particular, what happened here? I just lost my slide. That's all right. I'll just come back here. Here we go. Status. Yeah. So if you get passed over in a discussion and your expertise is disregarded or not consulted, that can really push our status fairness buttons. And if that happens, you can go into tunnel vision, anger mode, frustration, non-cooperative, difficult to listen to things because you just feel so wounded. You feel righteous and wronged when our status is scuppered like that. So there we have it. We have a number of different triggers that can cause us to go into an amygdala hijack. Now, if you're preparing for a difficult conversation, you need to know two things. What are your own triggers? And have they been pushed or triggered in this conversation or prior to this conversation? And what are the potential triggers of the other person? Are some of those at play in the issue around their behavior or the interaction? This is helpful in developing empathy and compassion and being able to then allow you to be non-reactive in the middle of a conversation. So have a look at what your triggers are and what the other person's triggers are. Okay, see you next time.